Thank you for leading us in that new adventure of singing this part of the psalm. That was lovely. So, in our story today, Jacob has settled in the land where his father had lived as an alien, the land of Canaan. This is the story of the family of Jacob, and I'm reading from Genesis 37, 1 through 4 and 12 through 28. Joseph, being 17 years old, was shepherding the flock with his brothers. He was a helper of the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report to them of them to their father. Now Israel, that's Jacob's new name, loved Joseph more than any of his other children, because he was the son of his old age, and he had made him a long robe with sleeves. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." He answered, "Here I am." So he said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron. He came to Shechem, and a man found him wandering in the fields, and the man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I am seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock." The man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him from a distance, and before he came near to them, they conspired to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we shall say that a wild animal has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he delivered him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into the pit here in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him, that he might rescue him out of the hand and restore him to their father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the long robe with the sleeves that he wore all the time, and they took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty, and there was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, with their camels carrying gum, balm, and resin, on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers agreed. When some Midianite traders passed by, they drew Joseph up, lifting him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they took Joseph down to Egypt. May God bless this hearing of the word. Genesis brings us this sad tale of jealousy and badly behaving brothers. Just to review the story, Jacob has reconciled with his brother Esau and settled back in his home country. He is the father of 12 sons and at least one daughter. The love of his life, Rachel, was the mother of the two youngest of the children, Joseph and Benjamin. After working 7 years for his uncle Laban, Jacob was tricked into marrying Leah, the older daughter, and then working for another 7 years to marry Rachel, the one he really wanted. So from the beginning, the family was in conflict. Leah and Rachel were in competition to produce male progeny, vital to the economic success of the family. They even involved their maidservants, Bilhah and Zilpah, in this contest. It seems insane to us, but in an agrarian and herding cultures, the more family to do the work, the better. So they wanted hands to keep the sheep. Rachel did not conceive until later in her life, so Jacob and Benjamin were several years younger than their older brothers. But two-parent families are becoming, I would say that most of us grew up in nuclear families. I mean, I did. I don't know, some of you may have a different kind of family experience, but nuclear families are kind of becoming a thing of the past. Two-parent families are becoming less common in the United States and many parts of the world. The youth program of the church I served in as pastor in urban Baltimore drew children from a lot of different socioeconomic backgrounds and racial backgrounds as well. At one youth group meeting, I asked the youth to draw their family tree. The exercise proved to be quite complex for some of the participants. I recall one girl in particular had circles and squares connected with a maze of lines. She definitely did not come from a traditional nuclear family. Rather, she had step-parents and step-siblings that did not fit into our neatly conceived charts. I was in awe of her capacity to juggle such a complex network of significant people in her young life. The Jacob family in our Genesis story was complicated. The family system spawned considerable competition, and there was strife between the sons who vied for influence and power. They were not one big happy family. Jacob had fathered children with two sisters and their maidservants, which set up this competitive environment. And their competition was passed on to the next generation. We learned that Joseph was his father's favorite, which provoked jealousy in his brothers. In terms of his father's favor, Joseph was number 11, and he had usurped the power of the oldest son, the firstborn. He was more than an annoying younger brother. The Genesis writer states that his brothers hated him and could not speak with him peacefully. The story from Genesis gives us an opportunity to reflect both on how we were raised and, if we are parents, how we are raising our children, or perhaps for some of you, how you will raise your children in the future. So what were or are the dynamics in our families of origin? If we are parents, what did we learn from our parents about good and bad child-rearing practices? At the time of Jacob, there were no parenting courses offered, or patterns of dysfunction were just handed down from generation to generation. At the time of Jacob, they didn't have an awareness of how generational issues flow from one generation to another. They weren't that self-reflective, or if they were, we didn't hear about it in the Genesis account. But even in Old Testament times, people were aware of positive and negative parenting. They could see the results of what they had done. For instance, the prophet Jeremiah hoped for a brighter future when he wrote, "In the days to come they shall no longer say, 'The parents have eaten sour grapes and their children's teeth are set on edge.'" I love that image. we have not yet arrived at the future Jeremiah anticipated. Ancient notions about parenting continue in many parts of the contemporary world. For example, the patrilineal tradition favoring firstborn males has survived in many societies. In our story today, Reuben, the oldest of Jacob's 12 sons, was the one who inherited the authority and the responsibility for the family. But Jacob broke with tradition, favoring the two youngest sons born to Rachel. This was not what the older siblings expected. And so the brothers tried to remove the threat of the inherited order by getting rid of the favored son, Joseph. As a typical younger sibling, Joseph craved attention from his older brothers and wanted to impress them as one worthy of their regard. His perpetual attempts to be noticed included describing his dreams, which only irritated his older brothers. For example, Joseph told his brothers about a dream in which, Kendra mentioned this, they were bowing down to him. And in another dream, the sun and the moon were bowing down to him. These dreams did not sit well with the older brothers. The tangible token of parental favoritism, the coat of many colors, enraged Joseph's older brothers. When their father sends the sons 50 miles away to pasture the flocks, Joseph stays home. Later, however, Jacob sends Joseph to check on his brothers. The sight of Joseph, the favored son, wearing the special gift from their father, the coat of many colors, enrages his brothers, and the green-eyed monster of jealousy takes control. In pondering the story of Joseph and his brothers, I reflected on the research of psychologist Ashley Campbell, who points out that we typically think of sibling rivalry that appears in children, like arguing over toys or vying for attention from parents. Research, though, shows that these childhood rivalries can develop into feuds that split families apart. Another psychologist states that although the average person typically thinks of sibling rivalry as school-age children arguing over toys, sharing a bedroom, or who gets more of mom's and dad's attention, the feuds and jealousy often spill into individuals' adult lives. In fact, these rivalries are hardly innocent, as they can rip apart families once considered loving and intact. The story of Joseph and his brothers presents us with an opportunity to examine our own relationships, especially our family relationships. Are there unresolved issues within us? Are there treacheries of the past we need to forgive? God is able to redeem our memories. How would we like to write the story of the rest of our lives? What would we like to see happen in our relationships? As I reflected on this story, I kept imagining how heartbroken the rest of Joseph's family would be at the news of his demise. And so the following skit is my imagined addendum to the story we read this morning in Genesis. This dialogue comes wholly from my imagination. The one daughter of Jacob we hear about in the Genesis story is Dinah, and Megan is going to be playing Dinah. In the skit, Dinah has overheard her brothers talking about what happened to Joseph, and she seeks consolation from her friend Milcah, who is played by Emily. Let's listen to their conversation.
Dinah, Shalom. How are you, my friend?
A horrible thing has happened.
What's wrong?
My brothers,
What have they done this time?
they told my father that Joseph is dead.
Oh I'm so sorry. What happened?
Well, they lied to my father. He's not dead.
Well, that's good. So what's wrong?
Well, you know that beautiful coat my father made for Joseph?
Oh, yes. I've never seen a finer, more colorful coat. So this is about the coat?
Not exactly. My brothers, well, except for Joseph and Benjamin, were out near Dothan grazing the sheep. They were gone a long time. So my father sent Joseph to look for them, to make certain all was well.
So what happened?
Joseph found my brothers. But you know how they just hate Joseph? He is always telling us about his dreams. It doesn't bother me so much, but the last one he described really made my brothers mad. In the dream, the brothers were all bowing down to Joseph, like he was a king or someone with power over them.
I don't think Joseph means to needle them. He just blurts out this stuff. Maybe he doesn't know he upsets other people?
Well, he really upset them this time. They returned with a coat covered in blood.
Oh, no.
They told my father that a wild animal killed him. My father is beside himself with grief. And of course, Rachel, his mother, is inconsolable.
That's awful.
Oh, but that's not the whole story. I overheard the brothers talking amongst themselves last night. I stood in the shadows outside the door. They didn't know I was there.
What did you hear?
Joseph was not killed by a wild animal. Oh, Milka, it's almost more horrible.
What's happened to Joseph?
They sold him to some Ishmaelites. Ishmaelites. They sold him into slavery. The caravan is headed to Egypt. Oh, Milka, I'll never see my brother again.
Your brothers are horrible. That is just awful. But at least Joseph is alive. He is clever. Let us pray God protects him.
You are such a comfort to me, my friend. Now, you must promise me that you won't tell anyone of this matter.
I give you my solemn word.
Thank you, Megan and Emily. Good job. If you want to read the rest of the story, you will find it in the remaining chapters of Genesis. The reading this morning leaves us hanging with the outlook appearing bleak for Joseph. So I imagined a hopeful ending because the story of Joseph and his family does have a happy ending. And I wanted to think that at least one family member might cling to hope. As God's people, we are hopeful. We believe in a loving, creating, empowering God who intends goodness for us and for all of creation. We believe in a God who is able to turn our worst situations toward good. We believe in a God who is with us in the darkest moments when we are in the pit of despair. We believe in a God who is able to redeem our memories. And we believe in a God who comes to our aid when we are in need of rescue. I invite us now to stand and say what we believe about this great God who is always with us.